Ukraine is striking hard at Russia's shadow fleet. Maritime drones from Buzi and a baby blew up several sanctioned vessels in the Black Sea at once. Ukrainian drones destroyed an aircraft factory in Taganrog and set fire to an oil terminal in Novorossiysk. After stepping down as head of the presidential office, Andriy Yermak announced that he would go to the front lines. Trump is ready to give Crimea to Putin. Umarov urgently flew to the US for negotiations. Erdogan is ready to send the Turkish army into Ukraine, yet another stab in the back for Moscow. Russia has completely failed its tax collection plan with a budget shortfall of minus 5 trillion rubles. And in Orenburg, there was a disgraceful launch of a so-called unparalleled missile. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dmitrovskaya. Right now, I'll tell you about the main news, but first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you on YouTube. Sea drones, Sea-Bay BSBU struck 2 targets at once. The tankers of Russia's shadow fleet, which is under Western sanctions. The successful special operation took place in the Black Sea off the coast of Turkey. The first shadow tanker, Kairos, sailing under the flag of Gambia, was empty and coming from Novorossiysk, but not far from the Bosphorus, the engine room suddenly caught fire. 25 crew members were evacuated. The second tanker, Rout, was heading to Turkey when drones knocked on its hull. During the attack by unidentified drones in the Black Sea, Russian sailors began to panic and called for help. The audio recording was released by the Turkish TV channel Haberturk. Russian Z-bloggers claim that the Virat was attacked by 5 naval drones. The Turkish Maritime Authority reported that the condition of the 19 crew members is normal, but the engine room is on fire. The official cause of the fire has not been named, and later there was a report that the shadow fleet tanker Russia Virat, which was heading towards Turkey, was attacked by drones again.
According to Union sources in the Special Services, this was a joint operation by the 13th Main Directorate of Military Counterintelligence of the SBU and the Ukrainian Navy. Both tankers suffered critical damage after being hit by drones and have effectively been put out of operation, which will deal a significant blow to the transportation of Russian oil.
Well, what can you say? Such is the karma for the shadow Russian fleet. Now, these tankers will no longer be transporting Russian oil, for example, to India or even to China. While Russia strikes at sleeping Ukrainian cities, Ukraine is responding powerfully. The Ukrainian armed forces attacked the marine terminal of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium near Novorossiysk. According to the Russians themselves, one of the 3 berths is beyond repair.
On the morning of November 29, 2025, as a result of an attack by Ukrainian unmanned surface vessels, USVs, in the waters of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium's marine terminal, the remote mooring device CPC-R-MD-2 sustained significant damage. It is beyond repair, according to the CPC press service.
According to official information from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, a plant in the city of Taganrog, where strategic bombers are being modernized, was hit. A fire broke out in the workshop where 2 95 aircraft are repaired. Another strike on the Afipsky oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai has also been confirmed. Locals there reported that explosions continued for over an hour. Oh my God. In Kazan, after explosions, a substation stopped working for the Russians and the city was plunged into darkness. In Tatarstan, there was a fire in the Alabuga area, and by the way, that's where the same Shaheds used for terror attacks on Ukraine are manufactured. And as reported by Russian media, the fire broke out at a battery warehouse.
The fire broke out at a battery warehouse in the Alabuga Special Economic Zone in Tatarstan. The fire covered an area of 5,000 square meters, according to the OES.
More than 300 people were evacuated from the building, helicopters were brought in to extinguish the warehouse fire, and now this is in Belgorod region, in the village of Dragunskoye. Here it was reported that a substation and energy nodes were hit. Local social media is burning up just as much as the transformers themselves. And in Volgograd, people also complained about explosions. Similar reports are coming in from the area of the Orsk oil refinery. Does anyone know what's burning over there? Because it really reeks of something. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud that we have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And for now, we continue. Now comes the most interesting part. And here's a fresh story about how the Russians made a loud fuss, you know what I mean, with their latest so-called analog weapon right at the launch. On November 28th, over the Russian Yasny test range in the Orenburg region, the sky suddenly lit up and glowed with purple smoke. It was Russia launching, judging by the video, an intercontinental ballistic missile, and it exploded spectacularly just after lifting off the ground. Of course, the Russian Ministry of Death isn't saying exactly what blew up, but they do recommend that locals avoid drinking tap water and stay out of open areas. According to Difference Express, it was the infamous Sarmat, the very missile Putin used to threaten the whole world. However, OSINT analysts and other sources suggest that most likely Russia failed to launch an old UR-100N missile. In any case, the result is laughable, and most importantly, Russia once again did not. They made a loud spectacle of falling face first into their own mess in front of the entire world. And may all their missiles be just as successful. The Russians are storming Pokrovsk around the clock and suffering heavy losses. It is known that right now Russian occupiers are mainly concentrated in the south of Pokrovsk. Meanwhile, small enemy groups are present throughout the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration. The Ukrainian armed forces, for their part, are actively pushing the enemy out.
Small groups of Russians who try to infiltrate the city and gather there are quickly detected and eliminated.
On the Kupiansk direction, as Commander-in-Chief of Ukrainian Armed Forces Oleksandr Syrsky says, Ukrainian defense units hold positions.
On the approaches to Kupiansk, our units are holding certain lines and increasing fire pressure on the enemy in order to block their supply routes.
More details about the situation at the front are in our military review.
The Ukrainian armed forces have regained control of the situation in Hulyapol. In the area of the settlement, more than 20 attempts to storm our positions have been repelled. And no new breakthrough has occurred according to the Southern Defense Forces.
Of Ukraine, a vast and historically significant nation located in Eastern Europe, known for its rich cultural heritage, diverse landscapes and resilient people. This country, with its deep-rooted traditions and strategic geopolitical importance, has been a focal point of international attention. However, there are rivers and forest belts where it is possible to hold the positions we currently have.
As it became known after the Russian advance in this direction, the command decided to redeploy part of the reserves to the Podhulyapol area. At the same time, Russia was quick to claim that its troops had entered the district center itself. However, this information has been refuted by our Center for Countering Disinformation. The rumors spread by Russian sources about the occupation of the village of Vaisok have also not been confirmed.
They have come right up to our fortified area, our logistics center. They are trying to send separate groups to the outskirts. In Hulyapol, intense fighting is once again taking place. Our defenders, as it were, have received some reinforcements, and there is an ongoing struggle to stabilize the situation in this direction.
At the same time, analysts say that Pokrovsk remains the main focus of the enemy's efforts. Attacks are taking place around the clock both in the city itself and on its outskirts in hopes of encircling the Ukrainian group.
The enemy controls most of the city of Pokrovsk, the south and the center. They are trying to carry out such actions and also gradually encircle it, tightening the ring around Mirnohrad.
However, in the endless assaults on the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are suffering colossal losses. Our command does not hide it. The main task of the Ukrainian armed forces today is to inflict maximum damage on the enemy group, and the defense forces are doing an excellent job at this.
The losses are so great that they have to use reserves that in theory were not intended to enter Pokrovsk. And even with operational reserves, Russia cannot take Pokrovsk. Right now, on average, more than 200 enemy bodies are being left per square kilometer. That is the killed and wounded, and that's an enormous number.
At the same time, in addition to defending, our troops in Pokrovsk sometimes manage to advance. In particular, as reported from the ground, there are periodic enemy clearances up to the railway line, which now serves as a kind of dividing line in the city.
The defense forces are indeed succeeding in carrying out counterattacks, which are being conducted in particular in Pokrovsk. We're talking about Kupiansk, we're talking about almost all our locations where the Russians are trying to advance. By the way,
Speaking of Kupiansk, according to Putin himself, the city is surrounded and under Russian control. In reality, there is no encirclement at all, and there are fewer and fewer Russians in the settlement with each passing day.
unfortunately, the enemy is still present in Kupiansk for now. It is quite possible that the defense forces will be able to improve their tactical positions. Today, I'm not saying that we will be able to completely drive out the enemy, although the trend that is emerging today in Kupiansk shows that the defense forces are managing to clear our Ukrainian land of the enemy meter by meter.
And good news came yesterday from the occupied territories. In particular, details have emerged about the strike on Crimea. Thus, the General Staff reported that the Panzer S-1 and Tor-2M air defense systems were attacked on the peninsula. After that, drones managed to destroy a drone warehouse, Orion and Forepost, as well as Striker Command Post and a concentration of enemy.
The dedicated and highly skilled individuals who comprise the workforce, including all employees, staff members, and team personnel, are essential for the successful operation and continued growth of the organization. In other words, these are the very same naval drones whose involvement was once again confirmed by Z Public, which apparently served as mini aircraft carriers delivering Mavics. The Mavics would then fly in and destroy the target. Mavics are, in this particular sense, the truly perfect tool because if you manage to successfully get them to the safe shore, they become virtually indestructible and highly reliable instruments.
So essentially, the defense forces used a new tactic where one large drone delivers many smaller ones to the attack site. Then, considering that everything went successfully, it seems that in the Russian rear very soon there will be a significant increase in...
We are confronted with numerous complex issues and significant challenges that demand our immediate attention and careful consideration. These multifaceted difficulties require comprehensive solutions. The head of the office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, has submitted his resignation, so yes, moving forward, we have to acknowledge that we will be talking about the long-awaited personnel decision in the office of the President of Ukraine.
The head of the office, Andriy Yermak, has submitted his resignation. I am grateful to Andriy for always representing the Ukrainian position in the negotiation track exactly as it should be. It was always a patriotic stance, but I want to make sure there are no rumors or speculations.
We haven't seen the actual resignation letter, but the President's website already has a decree on Yermak's dismissal. And here a question may arise. So what happens next? There are more than enough theories, ladies and gentlemen, but I'll start with news straight from the source. From Andriy Yermak himself. Well, almost. The New York Post published a comment from the now former head of the presidential office, which he gave a few hours after his dismissal. Are you ready?
I was humiliated and my dignity was not protected despite the fact that I was in Kiev since February 24th, 2022. That's why I don't want to create problems for Zelensky. I'm going to the front. I'm outraged by all the mudslinging. And what outrages me even more is the lack of support from those who know the truth.
But whether Yermak will actually end up on the front lines is still an open question. Because according to the publication Censor.net, citing sources, Andriy Borisovich is expecting to be charged. And since we're talking about suspicion and the case, how can we not mention yesterday's searches? But Ukrainska Pravda reported on how the searches were conducted and what was found during them. Was found?
Around 6 in the morning, employees of Nabu and Sepi entered or tried to enter the government quarter. There were some issues there because they weren't being let through. In the end, they forced their way in and didn't wait any longer. They were told, wait, first we let these people in, then those. They said approval was needed, that certain procedures had to be followed. They replied, we have urgent investigative actions to carry out. You understand, while we're standing here, some evidence could be destroyed over there. Documents and so on. And that's why, after about 7 to 10 minutes of all these arguments, they were forced to go straight into the government quarter. That's it. And then, if we had lost sight of them, there was information on Mirror Weekly that searches were being conducted in the president's office, including at Yermak's workplace and at a house somewhere near the presidential administration. Our sources in law enforcement do not confirm searches in the president's office, but they do confirm searches at Yermak's place of residence. They emphasize that several devices were seized, phones, laptops, and in fact their contents are now being examined.
And yesterday, Evlis's daughter asked Kiev residents what they thought about the searches at Yermak's place. And here, everything is as expected. People are generally in favor, but there are also those who are concerned about such a turn of events on the eve of negotiations. Let me remind you, Yermak not only chaired the presidential office the longest, but also led the negotiation team, and he is deeply involved in the peace process. Searching the head of the president's office, Yermak, is a very useful and moral thing to do. And searching all the individuals involved in the Midas case and his golden hand is a moral, fantastic, and very socially pleasing activity. This is all a provocation by the FBI and Trump against our delegation. I'm for President Zelensky, I'm for our delegation, and as for Yermak, well, that's just jokes. Our investment in the protests in July should reach its logical conclusion, so we strongly support this process. But people's opinions fully correspond to the numbers mentioned in the question. More than 60% of Ukrainians don't trust Yermak, and 70% believe he is involved in the Mendich scheme. Therefore, the decision to dismiss Yermak met the demands of society. The Guardian even considers the dismissal of Andriy Yermak to be President Zelensky's smartest move. The publication Telegraph hints that finally it has happened. After several months of active dissatisfaction from partners, Yermak is finally stepping down.
European allies may have even hinted to Zelensky that he should remove Yermak, but mistakes had already been made in relations with the White House. It was Yermak who advised Zelensky to arrange a meeting with Trump in the Oval Office, which ended in an argument. And it was also he who suggested giving the U.S. president photographs of prisoners of war, which led to an unsuccessful outcome of the meeting, according to the FT. Both Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. grew tired of Yermak's sharp, persistent style, and one of the publication's sources called him a person who irritates both parties. After the meeting at the White House, Trump administration officials advised Zelensky to fire Yermak, partly because he needed a translator for English, but to no avail.
Politico, in turn, calls the decision to dismiss him a tectonic shift for Ukraine. And
there is no doubt that Zelensky will miss his indomitable former lawyer. Many Ukrainian commentators have called Yermak the producer in the leadership duo where the former comedian plays the leading role and Yermak builds the political storyline. Now Zelensky will be left without his producer just as he is preparing for difficult negotiations with the United States over Donald Trump's controversial peace plan to end Russian aggression. Meanwhile, winter is approaching and Kremlin troops are trying to take advantage on the exhausted battlefields of Donbass.
Well, if you take the negotiation map into account, there is some doubt. Bloomberg writes that the dismissal happened at a critical moment for the country.
The dismissal of Zelensky's closest and at the same time most controversial associate is taking place at a decisive moment. President Donald Trump is stepping up diplomatic efforts in an attempt to end the full-scale Russian invasion. The American delegation, headed by Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll, is expected to arrive for a new round of talks after the initial draft peace plan offered Ukraine unfavorable terms. And
You can't argue with that because Yermak resigned a day before he was supposed to leave for the US for peace plan negotiations. But the think tank believes that although Yermak is no saint and this decision was long overdue, no matter how you look at it, it will play into the Kremlin's hands.
unfortunately, this will benefit the Kremlin and undermine Ukraine's position. Yermak will go down in history as a villain, not a hero. Since the beginning of the war, Ukraine has done a lot to fight corruption and to orient itself toward the West. This is a very stupid, selfish, and greedy move.
Well, I'll just add that the dismissal, despite the obvious questions for the head of the presidential office, was unexpected. So much so that people online are joking that they never thought they'd live to see this day. What about you? Were you expecting Yermak to be dismissed? And what do you think? Where will fate take him next? Share your thoughts in the comments. And now let's move on to the negotiations. I'll start with an important decision. Who will lead the Ukrainian delegation? President Zelensky appointed Rustem Umerov, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, as the head of the delegation for the negotiations. Given his involvement in the negotiations, this decision is logical and expected for the aforementioned talks. Umerov is going together with the first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Serhiy Kislitsya. And in Florida, they will hold a meeting with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. The content of this meeting is obvious, but what tone these negotiations will take remains a mystery. Because in addition to the scandal with Witkoff's tapes, which clearly show that he was helping Russia, there are also rumors that Donald Trump is ready to recognize the temporarily occupied Crimea as Russian. And according to the publication The Telegraph, to deliver this brilliant proposal, Trump is sending the already mentioned Witkoff and Kushner to Moscow.
The United States is reportedly ready to formally recognize Russia's complete control over Crimea and other currently occupied Ukrainian territories in order to secure a comprehensive ceasefire agreement. According to The Telegraph, Donald Trump sent his envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner to make a direct proposal to Vladimir Putin in Moscow. The publication wrote on Friday. It is also noted that Kyiv will not be forced to recognize Russia's control over the illegally annexed territories since 2014.
The Kremlin has also confirmed information about Witkoff's visit. Dmitry Peskov says that a meeting between Putin and Witkoff will take place in the first half of next week. For now, we are waiting for the results of the negotiations. Write what you think about all this in the comments.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Turkey is ready to send its army to Ukraine, another stab in the back for Putin from Erdogan. Ankara is moving further away from Moscow every day and getting closer to Kyiv, Washington and Brussels. How does this affect the course of the Russian-Ukrainian war?
Recep Erdogan has once again stabbed Putin in the back. The president of Turkey did this right after his last meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky. At that time, both leaders, behind closed doors, according to the press, discussed a number of very important issues regarding a ceasefire in Ukraine and subsequent security guarantees for official Kyiv.
Both President Erdogan and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the talks were constructive and positive, although no real details about the negotiations themselves were provided.
This sparked an even greater wave of rumors in political circles. While some reliable sources allegedly claimed that Erdogan was trying to persuade Zelensky to accept capitulation and agree to the Kremlin's proposal, others, on the contrary, insisted that the Turkish president was dissuading the Ukrainian leader from Putin's peace plan and urging an increase in military production.
They also discussed the growing defense cooperation, stating that the results of this cooperation will be seen in the future. In the first few years of this conflict, Erdogan stated that he was essentially the only person who had good relations with both Moscow and Ukraine, was a NATO member, and also had close ties with Washington.
However, as time goes on, it becomes more difficult, and Erdogan is increasingly less willing to continue his friendship with the bloody Russian dictator. After the latest sanctions imposed on Russia, buying oil and gas in The previous volumes at discounted prices is no longer possible for Ankara, which means that Turkey has no reason to coddle Putin and Russia anymore.
It is worth noting that in the past few months, relations between Turkey and Moscow seem to have cooled somewhat. Erdogan still communicates with Putin, but not as often as before. There have been fewer personal meetings. And one of the factors contributing to this is that with Trump's election as president, Turkey has significantly improved its relations with Washington. And especially Erdogan's personal ties with Trump have become very close.
But for the Kremlin, the growing friendship between Trump and Erdogan threatens disaster. Without the blessing of the Turkish president, Russia could lose a huge share of grey imports and dual-use goods, among other things, which are actively brought in through Turkey.
The process of restricting and reducing economic contacts with Russia is underway in all directions. Turkey was the largest partner of the Russian Federation for a long time, not only in the energy sector, but also with a simply colossal amount of economic interaction. But Turkey will also be cutting back.
As for aid to Ukraine, it seems that Ankara is giving its companies the green light here. After the loud statements from the Turkish Ministry of Defense about sending its contingent to our country, a number of Turkish companies simultaneously announced the establishment of joint military production. So it is quite possible that very soon, not only Ukrainian, but also Turkish missiles and drones, which until recently were friendly to the Kremlin, will be flying at Russian oil refineries deep behind enemy lines.
You see, we told you that the Kremlin was forced to resort to raising taxes. Well, that's because this special military operation is going so according to plan that in the Russian budget, a hole has formed. So due to a lack of funds for the war, the Russian authorities launched a tax reform in 2025. But predictably, the reform did not become a panacea. In short, it didn't help to stay within the planned budget deficit. Now, the deficit is projected to be 5.7 trillion rubles instead of the initial 1.2 trillion. Simply put, Russia failed its tax collection plan, and by the end of the year, the budget received 5 trillion rubles less than was planned. But the Kremlin is not giving up on attempts to plug budget holes by raising taxes. Starting next year, there are plans to increase the VAT from 20 to 22%. In addition, a record increase in utility tariffs has already been announced. But let me remind you, the special military operation is still going according to plan. Russians have been advised to prepare for a new pension reform in the next 20 years. Experts from the Institute of Economics of the Russian Academy of Sciences believe that the effect of the 2018 pension reform, when the retirement age was gradually raised to 65 for men and 60 for women, will be exhausted within the next 20 years. According to their estimates, by 2045 the country will again need to reform the pension system due to an aging population and increasing pressure on the budget. Our journalists know all the details?
Pensions are being discussed again in Russia. This time, there are no attempts to pretend that everything is under control. Economists from the Russian Academy of Sciences are speaking frankly. In 20 years, the country will need a new pension reform. Not because someone wants it, but because otherwise the system simply won't survive.
So you won't have an easy life, and we'll be asking much more strictly.
There will be fewer working-age people and more pensioners. This means one thing: the current model won't be able to support those who retire in the 2040s. And even now, those who live on a pension today are already feeling it.
If it weren't for my children, I would have literally starved to death. I'm just being honest.
They won't let you do anything. Anyone who tries to start a business will quickly be shut down. That's how our government knows how to do things.
A Russian pensioner is far from the image of a peaceful old age. It's waiting in lines at clinics, saving on medicine, buying bags of pasta on sale, and utility bills that get more noticeable every year than any promised indexation.
Potatoes. It's just a disaster. I don't even allow myself to buy cabbage unless I really have to. And potatoes now, that's a real problem.
Chicken, damn, that's just a whole other story. Chicken meat is already expensive, and don't even get me started on turkey. And fish, it's just crazy. 500 and up. I
am outraged about the price of potatoes. Why are potatoes so expensive?
Some people work their garden plots just to get through the summer without extra expenses. Some people keep working as long as they have the strength because a pension alone is only enough for the bare essentials, and even then, not always. In big cities, it's still bearable, but in the regions, it's almost impossible.
To them, we're just plain cattle, nothing more. It's good that they're alive. The main thing is that they have enough. And what about the people? The people will survive even worse. A deep bow to them.
We have so many people. How should I put it? Low income, including myself. I get 54,000. I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people like that. Well, the situation is tough. All you want to do is work. Let's hope for Putin that he keeps his promise to raise pensions for retirees.
Now, though, experts say that if nothing changes, things will only get worse. Right now, the balance is maintained through budget injections and subsidies that cover the deficit of the pension fund. But as the population ages, this deficit will only continue to grow. Moreover, starting January 1st, 2026, the value-added tax VAT in Russia will be increased. The rate will rise from 20 to 22%. This means that everything an ordinary person buys, food, goods, services, will become more expensive.
The funniest part is that officials even claim that the amendment submitted to the government will benefit the economy, since they will allow the Bank of Russia to lower the key interest rate. First of all, to expect that any tax increase in principle can put the economy on a higher growth trajectory is simply foolish.
Raising the retirement age only postponed the problem, it didn't solve it. Russia is gradually approaching a point where the choices will become tougher. Either reduce spending, raise the retirement age again, or change the very principle of how pensions are calculated. Each option will be less appealing to someone than the others. The irony is that the poverty of today's Russian pensioners is not an exception of the system, but its most honest reflection. Those who are young now may receive even more meager payments in the future. Life will not get easier on its own. Forecasts do not promise gradual improvement. They speak of increasing burdens, a shrinking workforce, and a growing share of elderly people. And this is a direct path to the social system becoming much more crippled.
It seems that Sobchak and Lolita, as they say, walked through the wrong door.
Sobchak and Lolita are suspected of being involved in a Bali villa fraud scheme similar to Guziva's. They also promoted Sergei Domogatsky, who left 29 people without property on the island.
The publication MASH reports that promotional videos praising Balinese villas like those by Larisa Guziva were also found on the social media accounts of both Ksenia Sobchak and Lolita.
On behalf of the victims, due to the inaction of blogger Sergei Domogatsky, who failed to provide property in Russia and on the island of Bali in the Republic of Indonesia, we have appealed to the Prosecutor General's office demanding an investigation into singer Lolita Milyavskaya, blogger Ksenia Sobchak, and TV host Larisa Guziva for promoting him as their friend and publicly giving certain guarantees and promises. We ask that they be checked for compliance with the law regarding advertising, tax payments, and involvement in this scheme.
In fact, there are already about 30 complaints filed against Domogatsky with the police, and the victims say that he, you'll never believe this, took money and didn't build the promised houses. In total, the clients of this developer lost about 150 million rubles. And while Domogatsky was making money off non-existent villas, Lolita and Sobchak were earning from advertising those same non-existent villas.
My good acquaintance, the entrepreneur Sergei Domogatsky. Domogatsky's Fachwerk, in the 5 years that we've known each other, has already built 1,200 houses and villas around the world.
Sergei Domogatsky. Easy to remember. Domogatsky. 62 square meters. This is the house you can win. Sergei has actually built, I think, 1,200 houses across our country. I've known him for a long time. I personally checked the quality.
Interestingly, just the other day, Domogatsky flew out from Bali, where, so to speak, he made his fortune selling villas in Malaysia, and now he's being sought by the Indonesian police. Well, and what about Lolita and Sobchak? Well, folks, nothing personal here, it's just business. What do you think of our news? Write to us about what we should change to become better. We'll definitely take it into account. And for now, please like this video to support what we're doing. And be sure to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss our next episodes. Thank you. See ya!